We can't get more successful unless we learn the very precious leadership skills of delegation, asking for help, listening to our bodies, and knowing when to take a break. All right, so you've heard yourself saying, I'm the hardest working person in the room. And you're beginning to notice that there's collateral damage. Hey guys, this is Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy. Thank you for joining me at this episode of the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm so psyched to have you here today because I think this identification with being the hardest working person in the room is such a fascinating topic because, oh my gosh, how many of you can relate? I mean, I definitely could. I used to be that same person who was like, maybe I'm not the smartest in the room, but I'm the hardest working. Or I don't know about everyone else in here, but I can outwork every other person in the room. I mean, thinking that way used to be what gave me strength. It used to be what reminded me that I was special. But here's the thing. That when we hold that perspective, and that's the belief we have about ourselves, everything becomes hard. I'll never forget, and you won't believe this story, but there have been 3 incidents in my life where I've literally thrown my hip out in yoga. It's true. I mean, I don't think that's a very common thing. I'm not talking about hot yoga. I'm just talking about relaxing yoga where I literally threw my hip out, and it's not one hip or the other. And there's nothing wrong with me and my connective tissue or my ligaments. Literally, I was overdoing it. I was the hardest working person in the yoga class, just like I have been my whole life. And how many of us can identify with that? And, what's so interesting is, to a certain extent, having that perspective and that self-belief does get you a long way. It does. I mean, it's probably what got you through medical or dental school. It might even be what got you your business and the success in your business. So why is working too hard so detrimental? Well, one of the big reasons is it drives you into survival mode. And what does that even mean? Well, survival mode is a place of fight or flight. And if constantly we're feeling hard, like everything has to be hard, that's where you live. And the problem with living perpetually in survival mode is that there's no room for creativity or significant growth or happiness in survival mode. Survival mode does not mean thriving. It means surviving. That's it. And if pushing and pressure and force and hard is all you've ever known how to do, then that's where you get stuck. This is where we get to a certain point in our careers where we look back and we say, I'm exhausted. And what is the point anyway? Right? I've just been working so damn hard all this time, and I'm exhausted. And that's when we sometimes get scared because that's the only way we know how to be. The other trouble with working too hard, beyond the obvious, which is it's tearing your body down, right? Like, you get to a certain age where you start to realize, oh my God, me pushing and forcing myself all the time is actually detrimental to my health. It makes you disconnect from your body. See, because in order for me to throw my hip out in that yoga class, I had to stop listening to the warning signs coming from my hip. Ouch. In order to be the hardest working person in the room, you push beyond those warning signs. You push past and push through and bypass your feelings in your body. But here's the thing, when we bypass our feelings And I'm using that word very liberally, not just how your body feels, but your emotions of being overwhelmed and overworked and stressed and exhausted. When we bypass those feelings, we bypass our power because the feelings have messages in them. When we ignore how we feel, both literally in our bodies and figuratively in our emotions, we lose the message that our bodies and our emotions are trying to send us. This is too much. You are exhausted. You are in pain. You've given away your power. Working too hard fosters a belief that you have to tear yourself down to get what you want. Ha ha. You know, I've shared this story on this podcast before as well. And that was when I first opened my second practice. And man, we were working hard. And for all of those of you who have opened a practice from scratch and dental practice from scratch, you know what I'm talking about. And I remember putting in 7 days a week of work to get this going. What's that saying? I love it. An entrepreneur is someone who works 100 hours a week to avoid working 40. Yeah, you know, when it's your baby, when it's your entrepreneurial venture, you pour way more hours into it than if you just showed up for work. You know, and so there's a certain amount of passion that you have at the beginning of a project like that, where you're willing to just put in the time and the hours. And then you start trying to feed motivation by reminding yourself, oh, you're the hardest working person in the room. You can do this. Keep pushing, keep pushing. It'll pay off. It'll pay off. And there gets this tipping point where you really are pushing beyond the messages of your body and your emotions and your exhaustion. And I'll never forget, you know, we eventually made this business work. And there was that critical moment where we were making more profit than our expenses. And then we held on. Like, you feel so fragile, right? And so you don't make any changes. You don't start paying yourself yet. And then a little bit of time goes by and then your accountant says, okay, start paying yourself. So you give yourself a very modest amount that you're willing to pay yourself. And we did that. And we lived like that for a while. And then there came the day where we had a sufficient amount of profit that we could actually pay ourselves a decent paycheck, a bonus. And we celebrated. We wrote that check. But 3 months later, my partner said to me, Tarryn, why have you not cashed that check? It's still sitting there in the bank. I kind of want you to do it so we have an idea of what's going on with the numbers here this month. And I realized it's because at that point, it had become too easy. I had told myself that I didn't deserve that money because I was having too much fun and work was easy. I had in my head this misconception that in order to earn good money, it had to be hard. I had to sacrifice and push and force and tear myself down to the ground in order to earn good money. That's where identifying with being the hardest working person in the room can work against us. When the deservency is tied to the hard work, that's when it becomes detrimental. When you feel like you have to sacrifice relationships, time, rest, sleep to be successful, and when one day it becomes easy, which it will, anything you do over and over and over after a certain amount of time becomes easy, we start to question its worth. Am I really deserving of this if it's not so hard anymore? Another reason why working too hard is detrimental, it feeds on this emotional addiction of hard. And what I mean by that is any addiction is where you do the same thing, the same habit pattern over and over and over, but you're getting a result that you don't want. Right? It's actually hurting you instead of helping you, right? We wouldn't say brushing your teeth is an addiction because that's actually helping you. But maybe drinking too much, if you're doing it repetitively and you're having a negative outcome, then that's an addiction, right? Because we should know if I do A and I get X result, and I don't like X result, I stop doing A. That's all. Well, the addiction is when we can't stop. So having an emotional addiction to hard means that you make everything hard, even though it doesn't feel very good and it's not serving you. That's what I was doing in my life. I had an addiction to hard. Yoga had to be hard. Running had to be hard. Eating had to be hard. Working had to be hard. Parenting had to be hard. And the problem with an emotional addiction is it starts seeping into every area of your life. And it also feels a little good. Because the other component of addictions are you do get a little bit of a dopamine hit. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it at all, right? You wouldn't keep stubbing your toe for fun because that hurts. But if you did something that had a little bit of a feedback loop of a little bit of an immediate gratification, like a dopamine hit, then you might keep doing it even if the long-term outcome was detrimental. So how does that look? Well, maybe that's with your intensity of checking off lists or multitasking or doing the hard thing, forcing, pushing, but it gives you an adrenaline rush. Anybody identify with what I'm talking about? Overworking and working too hard is also an obvious recipe for burnout. Ta-da! No big surprise. I'm not saying anything new here. We know this. And also, it keeps you small. It does. Overworking and working too hard limits your potential for success. That's the truth. Because we can't get more successful unless we learn the very precious leadership skills of delegation, asking for help, listening to our bodies and knowing when to take a break. Those are the components of uber success. So your addiction to hard, your identification with being the hardest working person in the room might actually be the one thing that's keeping you from greater success and happiness. Did I just blow your mind? I'm serious. Let's talk about what the opposite of hard is. Hey guys, I'm interrupting your podcast episode to let you know about an incredible new program that I am launching in January of 2023. It is specifically for practitioners in medicine and dentistry to help you rediscover happiness and inner fulfillment within your profession and your life. I remember what it was like for me when years ago I was so depressed and anxious and feeling like I had created and built a treadmill I just couldn't get off of, pushing through every day and wishing my life away. This program is the how of how to find happiness in your practice and in your life, because we know that when we feel good, that's when we can do good. Check out thebizofhappiness.com/radical happiness, or click the link in the show notes. I cannot wait to see you there. Well, the opposite is ease and flow. And that's where we're really tapping into creativity, ingenuity, creative problem solving, being detached from the outcome, making decisions from a place of ease and actual fun and joy instead of from a place of critical urgency and making things hard. I mean, the opposite of hard is what I was saying, delegating, asking for help, listening to your body, hearing when your body actually needs rest. We've been told for so long, you got to push through, push through, push through. What if we just trusted ourselves that we're not just going to turn into a blob on the couch eating bonbons, but that we're actually going to maintain our integrity to our patients and to our dreams, but not tear ourselves down in the process? Imagine that. I mean, seriously, guys, we're not giving ourselves enough credit here. All those ad campaigns trying to force you to push, push, push. That's so insulting. No, if I don't push myself, I'm not just going to fall into the gutter and do nothing anymore. I mean, do we have any faith in ourselves anymore? The opposite of hard means having patience and compassion for others and for ourselves. The moment I stopped forcing myself to push so hard to be the hardest working person in the room, I stopped resenting everyone else on my team who wasn't the hardest working person in the room. Imagine that. Imagine that for a moment. When you perceive yourself as the hardest working person in the room, and that's your greatest attribute, you start critically judging everyone else. I mean, literally, even I did this to my kids. Well, why don't they work harder? Why is my team not working harder? When we give ourselves the opposite, we allow for compassion and understanding and patience and human kindness and seeing one another as whole human beings and not just hardworking machines. The opposite of hard also means believing in your worth, your inherent worth, beyond what you do, beyond what you sacrifice. It means seeing yourself as a whole, deserving person. Just imagine that for a moment. Just for a moment, recognize how being so hell-bent on being the hardest working person in the room has made you so two-dimensional. It did me. 100%. When I allowed myself to come to my decision-making and my choices from a place of ease, from a place of calm, now I was able to make decisions with deeper sense of self-worth. Doesn't matter how it turns out. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. I'm worthy of this. Doesn't matter how hard I push myself or if I'm not feeling great today. I'm still worthy. Knowing how to be present, completely present, that's the opposite of hard. See, because hard and pushing and forcing doesn't allow us to be present. And I do think this is where we start missing and craving that elusive work-life balance is when we're forcing and pushing and rushing, we're losing sight of the humanity of ourselves. And so maybe nothing needs to change in your life other than just the perception of everything is hard. So step one is the awareness. Is this relating to you? And maybe it's not. And if it's not, then God bless you. That's awesome. But I have a feeling that in this story, in my sharing my vulnerability of my addiction to hard, many of you are seeing yourselves. And so number one, know that you're not alone. And also, bravo on the awareness of this. Oh my God. Yeah, I've said that too, that I'm the hardest working person in the room. What the, you know what? What the what? Simply noticing is such a big component. The awareness is always our superpower. And then I think another second step, because awareness is step one, but it's obviously not the answer. It's huge. It's a big awareness, right? Because you're going to start noticing all the ways you've been making things hard in your whole life. I mean, I was making dinner hard, for Pete's sake. I was making getting dressed in the morning hard. Everything had to be so intense. I don't know if you just heard what I just did, but I just took a deep breath. Just talking about it gets my nervous system all revved up. So if awareness is step one, then I'd say step two is asking yourself, how am I making this so hard? And what do I need to do to make it easy? And really, those are the greatest leadership skills, right? Because great leaders are not ones that are forcing and pushing and driving and being the one right in the trenches working hard all the time. Great leaders are the ones who know how to delegate, who know how to ask for help. great leaders create beautiful businesses or processes and then say, fly, baby, fly. Same with great parents. They embed in their children some beautiful values and mindsets. And then they say, now go ahead and live your beautiful life and make big changes in the world, my love. They don't force and push and micromanage and helicopter for the rest of that child's life. No. The idea of great leadership is to have the vision, have the creativity, have the insight, that spark of intellectual curiosity, put the processes in place, and then watch it lift off and fly all by itself. But if we're so addicted to the hard, we can't do that. So simply asking yourself, wow, this is feeling really hard right now. How could I make it easy? And the answer will come. I mean, it's unique to you. That's paying attention to your intuition, paying attention to your inner wisdom. That's when you realize, oh, I could just ask my husband to pick up dinner on the way home. Or, oh, here I am at work. It feels so hard. I'm writing these enormous letters to every referring dentist every time I see a patient. How can I use technology to make this easy? How can I create a template to make this easy? How can I take advantage of all the components of the software that I'm paying so much money for to make this easy? How can I delegate to one of my team members to elevate her in her excellence, make her feel great about herself, to make it easy for me? Such a great question. I think another component of learning to undo the hard is learning how to calm your nervous system. Now, I know in the midtro, you heard me talk about nervous system regulation for dentists, and I think this is still a really important component of what we do that no one ever taught us how to do in dental school, which is literally how to bring our stressed out nervous system from sympathetic nervous system storm, the hard, to parasympathetic rest and digest, the calm. Right? How to actually go from one to the other. And the idea is to shorten the period between stress and calm. Things are going to stress us out. There will be times when things are hard, like learning a new software, learning a new program, speaking in a new way to your patient, or having a challenging conversation with your spouse or your team member. Those feel hard, and they are hard. But then how quickly we can recover so that we can go to the next thing with ease and calm, so that we can learn from that opportunity, that moment, so that next time is ease and calm and not stress. It's so interesting. I just had a sudden memory of another behavior pattern that you might identify with, and that is, have you ever had a moment where you've checked off all the things on your to-do list and you were a little high, right? A little adrenaline rush. And suddenly you're thinking, okay, what else can I do? What else can I do? Where else can I go? Sometimes this happens at home where you've done the laundry, the cleaning, this, the that, and you're like, okay, I'm on a roll. Let's go. Where's the next? And it's very hard for us to return to calm. That's what nervous system regulation for dentists is all about. How quickly you can train your body to go from stress state to calm state. And I think this is a big component of this identification with hard. So definitely check out. It's a great course, guys. It's a 4-week audio course. It's self-led. You can listen to it on the way to work, and it's got some beautiful meditations. And if you haven't been doing meditation, don't be intimidated. They are easy. 10 minutes. That's it. But what a great introduction into one of the greatest components of success. Every single person that I ever interviewed on this podcast, I asked a few questions of them. I asked kind of, what are your secrets? What's your definition of happiness? And what I'd say a majority of them, of the most successful and happy business owners and entrepreneurs that I interviewed, the majority of them said their secret was meditation. And I think it's this idea of returning your body to calm. Because when we're in a place of calm and not force and stress and making it hard, that's when beautiful ideas and downloads and creativity starts coming in, and confidence, empowerment. But we can't get there from a place of stress and push and force and hard. So if you're interested in nervous system regulation for dentists, please check it out. Text the word Be Calm, that's one word, BECALM, to 66866. I highly recommend it. This is the practices that allow you to return to calm, and definitely a great place to start when you recognize, oh, you know what? She's right. I feel like I'm the hardest working person in the room, and maybe it's what I've always admired about myself. But maybe right now you're beginning to realize the collateral damage. Well, thank you, friends. As always, I'm always honored that you've spent this time with me listening to this episode. And I'm always so hopeful and so inspired that you are taking a moment for a new perspective. And however this lands, I'd love to hear from you. So shoot me a message at tarryn@thebizofhappiness.com and let me know, what else would you like to hear about? And are there any guests that you'd like to see coming up in the future? And until next time, remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.